Today, I'm reviewing the BLON BL03 II, the successor to the legendary BL03. Let's get it. What's cracking, audio fans? It's David here from Prime Audio Reviews. Now, a lot of you, if you've been around for a while, you will be familiar with the BL03. Just legendary, absolutely legendary IEM. Came out around 5 years ago and people went wild for it. As soon as I heard it the first time, I knew it was something special. The stock cable was absolute dog shite, and you can see it there. The reason, because it was just so thin above the Y split, it's an absolute tangling nightmare. But you know, that didn't stop people from realizing just how amazing these were. And to be honest, I had just had these sitting on a shelf for years. Like, it's been literally 2, maybe 3 years since I even listened to these because I'm just busy. I got so many IEMs. I don't have time to go back and revisit everything that I've reviewed in the past. But 2 days ago, I took these out, for obvious reasons. I took these out for a full day and I was amazed. I could not believe how good they still are, how well they've held up compared to current IEMs. Not only that, but it was a lot cooler in tonality than it was in my memory. I just remembered it being very warm, very mid-centric, mid-forward. It's still mid-forward for sure, but actually had really good clarity. It wasn't that warm. It didn't have all that much bass at all, but we'll get into that. Not everybody is familiar with that. I'm going to try and do the BL03 II for the people who don't know the original model, because obviously not everybody has heard that. So it seems like today I'm on a real rant, but let's just see where we go. So the price of the BL02 is $32. It is a budget IEM. $32. That's just like in the realm of the Zigat Nuo, some of those excellent KZ models, probably the Kiwi Ears Cadenza. There's just too many to mention. There's so many. But let's focus for now on the BL03 II. So it's got a 10mm dual chamber dynamic driver. So the original had dynamic driver. This one's got a dynamic driver. Obviously, it's an upgraded version. Like, I think the original BL03 had, what was it, like they were calling it a second gen driver, a carbon nanotube driver. We're probably up to the 4th generation now, 3rd or 4th generation. And I did read what material this new driver is, but I can't remember because it at the end of the day, it's irrelevant. It's all about how they sound. But before we get to the sound, let's talk about the design and the build. So obviously you can see the original had this polished metal surface, surprisingly resistant to fingerprints and scratches. I mean, mine are 5 years old. They took a beating. I used them a lot during my initial review and they still look fantastic. The new model obviously has this matte black finish, slightly textured, which is even better for resisting fingerprints and scratches. There are a couple of other differences, namely the 2-pin connectors. You can see this one has the old hooded style, whereas this has a flush connector. But apart from those differences, we're basically looking at the same shell, same size, same nozzle angle pretty much as far as I can tell. And that brings both the positive and the negative aspects of the original. So super comfortable, but perhaps not the most stable IEM. I had to mess around trying a few different types of ear tips until I found the right one. I should mention now, by the way, this is the new cable, which is miles ahead of the original one, which is just, like I said, dog shite. This one is a lot better in terms of material. However, I think it's still shite because of these ridiculous ear hooks. I mean, look at that. if you've ever seen an aggressive ear hook, that's them there. That just renders this entire cable totally unusable for me because it makes the IEM twist forward in my ear. Hey, suddenly the seal is gone. It just doesn't work. So that's why I've got this one here. This is an OE cable. What does it stand for? Optimization elements, I believe. It's a gorgeous cable, and you can see it's actually an MMCX cable with 2-pin adapters on there, but it's a beautiful cable. I've been using that with the BL03 Mark II because it just works. I can get I can get a really secure, stable fit. But enough about me. You're here for the IEM, so let's talk about it. It's basically got a fairly balanced sound signature, slightly V-shaped. It's got a fairly even spread between the bass, the mid-range, and the treble. There is a slight focus on the mid-range and vocals, which is relevant when comparing with the original, but like I said, not everybody has heard the original, so I'm trying to review this one first. So yeah, slight focus on the upper mid-range. They tried to keep the mids relatively forward, but it is still slightly V-shaped, but it's a very different beast compared to the original, but we'll get to that. Let's have a look at the graph. So there it is, slightly enhanced bass north of neutral, but not hugely boosted. It is in fact has more bass presence than the original, but again, yeah, let's just stop talking about that until we get to the proper comparison. Let's talk about the bass of the BL03 Mark II. So it's only slightly boosted above neutral, but it's got a satisfying low end presence. It's not overwhelming in any way. It's a nicely controlled bass. Like I said, it's that updated driver. It's the Gen 3 or Gen 4 driver now. It's got a nice amount of texture, and that means it reproduces like subtle variations and nuances within the bass frequencies, which sort of prevents it from sounding like a single droning note or just a blurry mess. But the bass is fairly evenly distributed between the sub bass and the mid bass. It gives you a nice balanced mix. It's neither too forward and it's not hollow either. And while this one can generate some pretty enjoyable sub bass rumble, it's definitely not bass head level bass. It's not that forward and big, but it is satisfying enough, at least for me. The mid bass strikes a good balance between tightness and weight, which combines like control with engaging impact, and the bass tuning leaves ample space for the mid range to breathe, which ensures clarity and it prevents any unwanted masking or smearing from the bass in the lower mids. So let's move on to that mid range now, and it presents a mostly neutral tone and note weight in the mid-range. Vocals and mid-range instruments are reasonably forward, which ensures they don't get lost in the mix. They're not drowned in bass or treble. The clarity is good, so you can hear individual instruments and vocal nuances shining through. Overall, the BL03 Mark II has a pretty impressive tonal quality in the mid-range for a budget IEM. And then let's talk about the treble, which is interesting here. It seems like it's been catered to counter criticisms against the original BL03. And, well, let's just get that out of the way. So the main criticisms about the original model were a somewhat bloated bass or not the fastest, most responsive bass, and a fairly intimate soundstage. So the treble tuning of the BL03, I think it's been catered to sort of counter that. So in other words, it has been lifted, which adds a little bit of vibrance and presence to vocals before it starts tapering off or rolling off. Then there is a peak in the upper treble as well at around 12 or 13 kilohertz, which sort of heightens the upper harmonics and gives the overall presentation a bit more air. So with that improved treble, we get an increase in soundstage dimensions and detail retrieval, And thankfully it does that without introducing any sharpness or sibilance. So the treble is a little bit livelier than the old one, but it's still smooth. I didn't really have any sense of harshness or discomfort testing these at any time. So in terms of soundstage and technicalities, the soundstage is, in contemporary times, modern times, it's fairly average in size. It is wider than the original stage, the original model's stage, and it also has a pretty good sense of depth, forward depth in the stage. The detail retrieval of the BL03 Mark II is actually above average. It's really good. This IEM can pick up some of the micro details that a lot of other IEMs miss. The instrument separation is good, but it does deteriorate somewhat during complex passages due to that bass. Although we have an updated driver, it still tends to mask the mid-range a little bit during complex passages, depending on the recording, of course. So as a result, the overall resolution is fairly ordinary, but we have to keep in mind this is a $30 IEM, so you have to keep your expectations in check. Alright, it's time for that comparison. Let's bring out the original BL03, the IEM that catapulted BLON into the hearts and the ears of budget audio enthusiasts around the world. I talked about the build already, so no need to comment on that, except I just want to reiterate that these are 5 years old and I've used them quite a bit in the old days and they still look great. So let's start with the bass, and look, both of these IEMs share a fairly similar bass curve on the graph, but the original model actually has a little bit less bass quantity. It's very little, minimal. It's like 2 or 3 decibels difference in the bass quantity. So the BL03 II Mark II, it edges out the original in sub-bass extension. The new model has slightly better sub-bass extension and a bit deeper rumble. In the mid-range, the core presentation of both IEMs is similar, but the original model is slightly more restrained in the upper mids and the lower treble. And this difference results in a less V-shaped sound, or it's more linear on the original, whereas the new model is slightly more V-shaped. So the original BL03 presents a more forward mid-range, which is one of the things that people loved about it, while the new model emphasizes the upper mids a bit more, which gives vocals a bit more presence and clarity, but again makes it more V-shaped at the same time. Now, the contrast in the upper frequencies of the treble leads to distinct differences. The BL03 Mark II has a brighter and a more detailed presentation. So the tonality is a little brighter, the detail retrieval is a little bit better on the new model, but that comes at the cost of potential harshness. Like I said, I don't find this harsh, but the upper mid-range lift and the lower treble verging on a little bit of shoutiness sometimes, where I didn't find that happening with the original. So the original BL03 has a smoother, more forgiving treble, although it sacrifices some airiness and micro detail retrieval in order to achieve that. But overall, the original BL03 has a more balanced and cohesive sound signature, and it prioritizes a very natural and forward mid-range and a less emphasized treble. So it's a little bit more relaxed and easygoing, though it might not be as exciting or as detail oriented as the Mark II, depending, which one is going to suit you better depends on individual preferences. Personally, I love them both. I was quite struck the other day when I took these out, and I just couldn't believe how good they still sound and how well they've held up over, in the 5 years since their release. These are still quality. I would still recommend this original model today. But let's circle back to the BL03 Mark II. And is it worth it? Was it worth the wait? Should you get it? Look, if you have the original, there's not a whole lot of difference. But like I said, the technical performance of the new model has improved. It's got a slightly wider soundstage. It's got better detail retrieval, but it is more V-shaped. The original still has the beautiful forward mid-range with still good clarity and pretty good detail. But if we're looking at the Mark II as a standalone product in 2025, it's a pretty good IM. For $30, yeah, absolutely, I can recommend this. It's pretty good. Does it have the same charm? Oh, does it have the same charm as the original model? Maybe not, but it does have, like I keep saying, better technical performance, especially in the treble and detail retrieval. So it is a good IM. I can recommend this. I don't know what else to say. I'm going to wrap it up there. So thanks for watching the video. If you liked it, hey, give us a thumbs up. Pa Family Audiophile Style. If you're new here, why don't you hit that subscribe button before you go? And until next time, I'll see you later.